You're nothing but dead weight. I liquidated father's enterprise. Best of luck covering expenses, my offspring declared. I grinned and responded, very well. Best of luck to you. Upon their arrival in Venice and accessing their financial accounts, I'm delighted you're present. Stay with my narrative through to completion and mention the metropolis you're viewing from so I can observe how widespread my tale has become. I was positioning fresh orchids in the porcelain vessel when I detected Marcus's vehicle entering the property. The rumble of his Mercedes's motor invariably caused my abdomen to constrict lately. He exclusively appeared when requiring something, and it had been 90 days since our previous exchange. Through the glass, I observed him materializing from the operator's compartment, straightening his costly blazer. Veronica trailed behind, her stilettos tapping against the concrete as she adjusted her auburn locks. Even from this distance, I could perceive the resolute expression on her features. Whatever their purpose here, she was orchestrating it. The chime sounded twice, piercing and demanding. I positioned the vessel and proceeded gradually toward the entrance, my chest already bracing for letdown. Upon opening it, Marcus scarcely acknowledged me. "Mother," he stated tersely, advancing inside without awaiting permission. "Discussion is necessary." Veronica swept past me, her fragrance overpowering in the compact corridor. She was grasping a cowhide attaché, which she held like armament. "Greetings, Dorothy," she articulated with that artificial pleasantness that invariably made my flesh tingle. I guided them to the parlor, the identical one where Marcus had achieved his initial footsteps 38 years prior. Presently, he positioned himself in its center like an outsider, his limbs crossed, observing everything excluding me. "Might I obtain coffee?" "I've just prepared a fresh container," I proposed, attempting to preserve some normality. "This isn't a courtesy appearance," Marcus stated, his tone more frigid than I'd previously experienced it. "Be seated, Mother. There's information you require knowing." My lower limbs felt feeble as I descended into my preferred armchair, the one Benjamin and I had selected together 43 years ago. Veronica positioned herself opposite me, unsealing her attaché with calculated precision. Marcus remained vertical, dominating over both of us. "The enterprise is liquidated," he proclaimed as though he were referencing meteorological conditions. The declaration struck me like corporeal impact. What significance does liquidated possess? Veronica extracted a substantial collection of documentation, positioning them on the table, separating us. "The transaction concluded yesterday morning," she articulated, her tone commercial. "Marcus has been managing all documentation for multiple months." I gazed at the contracts, my perception obscuring marginally. The enterprise Benjamin and I had constructed from emptiness, the one that had sustained our household for generations, was eliminated. "But I remain the principal shareholder," I murmured. Marcus released a severe chuckle. "Mother, you haven't participated in the daily functions for 36 months, not since father perished. You don't even comprehend the fiscal matters anymore." "That's inaccurate," I stated, but my tone sounded diminutive, even to my personal auditory sense. "Observe yourself," Veronica interjected, indicating toward me with groomed fingernails. "You can scarcely manage this dwelling. The invoices accumulate on your culinary surface for weeks. You disregard commitments. Just previous month, you contacted Marcus 4 occasions in one diurnal period, inquiring about the identical matter." Warmth ascended in my facial features. It was factual that I'd been contacting Marcus more regularly since Benjamin's demise, but not because I was bewildered, because I was isolated, because I missed possessing someone to distribute determinations with. Marcus extracted a seat directly before me, his joints on his legs. "Mother, you're 67 years mature. You've been struggling since father departed. The enterprise requires youthful governance, innovative concepts. I cannot persist observing you operated into the terrain. The enterprise is generating profit," I stated, my tone stronger presently. The trimestral documents demonstrate what father established years previously," Marcus interrupted. "But the industry is transforming. Innovation, mechanization, electronic promotion. You don't comprehend any of that." Veronica acknowledged sympathetically. "We're not attempting to damage you, Dorothy. We're attempting to safeguard you." The purchaser compensated considerably above marketplace valuation. The currency will maintain you comfortable for your remaining existence. I examined between them, investigating for any indication of the offspring I'd cultivated, the youth who used to ascend into my embrace when tempests frightened him. Instead, I perceived a gentleman who observed me with scarcely concealed restlessness. "What quantity?" I inquired quietly. Marcus and Veronica exchanged a perception. 3.2 million, he stated. After taxation and charges, you'll possess approximately 2.1 million in your account by Friday. It was favorable compensation. Superior than favorable, genuinely. But the currency wasn't the argument. You liquidated our enterprise without even inquiring of me. I'm inquiring of you presently, Marcus stated, his manner suggesting the discussion was terminated. I'm inquiring you to authorize these documents, making it official, to acknowledge that the transaction was in your superior interest. Veronica inclined forward, her tone assuming that syrupy characteristic again. Consider it, Dorothy. No additional committee assemblies. No additional concern about personnel difficulties or marketplace variations. You can concentrate on what genuinely matters. Your botanical area, your literary society, perhaps some exploration. Marcus positioned himself abruptly, moving to the aperture. When he rotated back, his countenance was rigid. The reality is, Mother, you're dead weight. You have existed ever since Father perished. You contact me persistently with inquiries that any capable enterprise proprietor should comprehend. You second speculate every determination I execute, even though you don't understand the contemporary marketplace. The phrase, dead weight suspended in the atmosphere like vapor from combustion. I sensed something interior me fracture. Not rupture precisely, but fracture like frozen water beginning to dissolve. I liquidated Father's enterprise because it was the appropriate action to execute. Marcus continued, his tone ascending marginally. For the commerce, for the personnel, and for you. Best of luck with the expenses on your novel apartment, because this dwelling is going to require more to preserve than you can manage on a stationary income. Veronica projected him a cautionary observation, but he disregarded it. You're my offspring, I stated softly, more to myself than to him. And you're my maternal parent, he replied, which is why I'm executing this. Someone must make the difficult determinations, and clearly it's not going to be you. I positioned in that seat for what seemed like hours, but was presumably only minutes. My consciousness was strangely tranquil, like the center of a cyclone. When I finally elevated my gaze, both Marcus and Veronica were observing me expectantly. Acceptable, I stated simply. Best of luck. Marcus blinked. What? I stated, acceptable. Best of luck. I positioned myself gradually, smoothing my garment. I assume you'll require me to authorize those documents. Where? Veronica fumbled with the contracts, clearly anticipating more of a struggle. Here and here, and initial there. I authorized where they indicated. My penmanship steady, despite the tremor I sensed inside. When I concluded, I handed the instrument back to Veronica and proceeded toward the entrance. That's it? Marcus called after me. You're not going to dispute, not going to guilt manipulation me about household loyalty? I rotated back to confront him, my hand on the aperture mechanism. Would it modify anything? He unsealed his oral cavity, then sealed it again. I didn't think so, I stated. Have a wonderful duration in Venice. I hope the meteorological conditions is pleasant for your matrimonial voyage. Veronica's optical organs widened. How did you comprehend about Venice? I grinned for the initial occasion since they'd materialized. I comprehend more than you think I execute. After they departed, I positioned back in my armchair and observed around the parlor. Everything was precisely the identical as it had existed an hour prior. Yet, everything had transformed. The quietness felt different presently. Not isolated, but expectant, like the moment before sunrise. I extended for my communication device and dialed a number I comprehended by cardiac muscle. Leonard, it's Dorothy. I think it's duration we had that discussion. Leonard materialized within the hour, grasping the identical deteriorated cowhide container he'd been utilizing since I initially encountered him 28 years ago. My longtime legal counsel, and more significantly, my companion, appeared precisely as I anticipated him to concerned, but not astonished. I assume Marcus proceeded with it, he stated, positioning himself into Benjamin's former seat without formality. Every declaration precisely as we predicted. I distributed him coffee from the container I'd manufactured earlier, my hands steadier presently than they'd existed in months. He called me dead weight, Leonard, his precise declarations. Leonard shook his cranium, his silver eyebrows knitting together. I'm apologetic, Dorothy. I comprehend we prepared for this, but it still must have damaged. I positioned opposite him, embracing my personal vessel. The damage stopped surprising me years prior. What surprises me is how predictable he's become. Shall we review the chronology? Leonard inquired, extracting a substantial folder from his container. I acknowledged, though I comprehended every detail by cardiac muscle. We'd been planning this for 36 months, ever since Benjamin's memorial, when Marcus had extracted me aside and suggested I might desire to simplify my commercial responsibilities. It commenced in 1986. I began, my tone assuming the cadence of a narrative I'd told many occasions. Benjamin and I were both 28, recently out of university, and completely impoverished. I had a commercial degree and a cranium full of concepts. He had charisma and the capability to charm financiers. Leonard grinned. The classic combination, except everyone assumed Benjamin was the intellect of the function. I positioned my coffee vessel with a soft sound. The financial institution advances were approved because of his charm. The early partnerships occurred because gentlemen in the 80 seconds were more comfortable dealing with other gentlemen, so we performed the entertainment. I proceeded to the mahogany workstation in the corner, extracting a framed photograph from the bottom compartment. It displayed Benjamin and me at the ribbon, severing for our initial office structure. He was grasping the cutting implements, radiating at the photographic device. I was positioning marginally behind him, my hand on his shoulder, grinning but observing the assembly. I was invariably observing. I stated more to myself than to Leonard. While Benjamin operated the chamber, I was calculating who possessed genuine influence, who was just conversing extensively, which agreements would genuinely materialize. And the enterprise structure, Leonard prompted. Officially, Benjamin possessed 65%. I possessed 35%. But the genuine power was in the subsidiary enterprises, the holding foundations, the intellectual property entitlements. All matters I established and managed while Benjamin concentrated on the public countenance of the commerce. I unsealed another compartment, this one filled with contracts that Marcus had never perceived. When Marcus joined the enterprise 9 years ago, Benjamin was already displaying indications of his cardiac condition. We comprehended we required to plan for succession. Leonard extracted his reading optical aids. That's when you established the Summit Foundation. Precisely. I sensed a familiar satisfaction remembering how carefully we'd constructed it. 75% of the enterprise's genuine valuation, the patents, the international contracts, the commercial property holdings, was transferred to a foundation with me as the exclusive beneficiary. The remaining 25%, which included the daily functions and the enterprise designation, stayed in the traditional corporate structure. And Marcus comprehended none of this. I chuckled, but there was no humor in it. Marcus comprehended what he desired to comprehend. He was so eager to prove himself, to demonstrate that he could operate matters superior than his old-fashioned maternal and paternal parents. He never inquired the appropriate questions. The afternoon solar illumination was streaming through the apertures presently, illuminating dust particles that danced in the atmosphere like tiny secrets. I remember another afternoon almost precisely a year prior, I stated, when I'd overheard Marcus on the communication device in Benjamin's former office. He was conversing to Veronica. She was inquiring about the enterprise's assets, about whether I had any genuine control over the finances. Marcus chuckled and stated I was just a figurehead, that I'd never understood the commercial side of matters. Anyway, Leonard made a notation on his legal tablet. That's when you determined to accelerate the chronology. That's when I realized my offspring had never genuinely comprehended me at all. I returned to my seat, sensing the weight of generations settling around me. For 38 years, I've been the woman behind the curtain. I've let Benjamin take credit for my concepts. Let Marcus believe I was just his scatterbrained maternal parent who required protection. Why? Leonard inquired gently. It was an inquiry he'd posed many occasions over the years. Because I thought it was what they required from me. I traced the rim of my coffee vessel with my finger. Benjamin required to sense like the success was his. His pride demanded it. And Marcus required to believe he was rescuing me from my personal incompetence. It gave him purpose. But Benjamin comprehended the reality, I stated, my tone softening, especially at the termination. The night before he perished, he made me promise something. He stated, "Don't let Marcus take advantage of your kindness, the manner I executed. Make certain he learns what you're genuinely worth." Leonard reclined back in his seat, studying me with the observation of someone who'd comprehended me long enough to read between the lines. And presently, now Marcus has liquidated what he thinks is our entire enterprise for $3.2 million. I grinned, and this occasion there was definitely humor in it. What he doesn't comprehend is that he liquidated about 25% of the genuine valuation, the shell, you might state. The Summit Foundation holdings are worth, as of yesterday's assessment, approximately $11.5 million. I extracted a fiscal statement from the workstation compartment. The patents alone are worth $5 million. The commercial properties we possess in different locations are worth another $4.2 million. The international distribution entitlements account for the remainder. Leonard whistled low. And Marcus has no concept. Marcus has spent the previous 36 months telling me I don't understand contemporary commerce. He's presumably correct. I don't understand why you'd liquidate a profitable enterprise without executing due diligence on its genuine assets. I positioned and proceeded to the aperture, observing out at the botanical area Benjamin and I had planted together. Do you comprehend what Marcus stated to me previous Christmas? He stated I was existing in the past, that I required to accept that the commercial world had moved beyond what a woman of my generation could understand. What did you tell him? I told him he was presumably correct. I rotated back to Leonard, and then I manufactured 3 novel international agreements and increased our patent portfolio by 45%. Leonard sealed his folder and inclined forward. So, what occurs presently? Now we anticipate for Marcus and Veronica to materialize in Venice. They're staying at the Palazzo Veneto, the presidential accommodation. I reserved it for them myself as a matrimonial gift. Utilizing enterprise funds that no longer exist, Leonard stated. Utilizing funds from an account that Marcus thinks contains his inheritance currency, the account that will display a 0 balance when they attempt to access it tomorrow morning. And the phone calls? I chuckled, the sound echoing in the quiet chamber. That's just an estimation. Comprehending Marcus, it might be more. Leonard packed his documents back into his container, but he didn't position to depart. Dorothy, are you certain about this? Once this performs out, there's no returning back with Marcus. I considered his inquiry, genuinely considered it. Was I certain? Was I prepared to lose my offspring completely in order to teach him who I genuinely was? Leonard, I stated finally, I lost my offspring the diurnal period. He determined I was dead weight. Everything that occurs presently is just me obtaining my dignity back. After Leonard departed, I positioned alone in the dwelling that suddenly felt more like habitation than it had in years. I extracted my communication device and scrolled through my contacts until I located the number I was investigating for. Catherine, it's Dorothy. Yes, I comprehend it's been a while. Listen, I have a proposition for you. How would you sense about operating an enterprise again? As I conversed, outlining my plans for expanding the commerce Marcus had just unknowingly authorized away, I realized something had shifted inside me. For the initial occasion since Benjamin's demise, I sensed like myself again the genuine me. The woman who'd built an empire while everyone thought she was just serving coffee and maintaining the ledgers. Tomorrow, Marcus would learn the difference. Whether he could handle the reality remained to be perceived. The initial call materialized at precisely 10:23 a.m. Venice time, which was 3:23 a.m., where I was positioning in my culinary chamber, wide awake, with a vessel of herbal tea. I'd been counting the hours, comprehending that Marcus and Veronica would attempt to access their fund's initial matter in the morning after their materialization. I let it sound. The second call materialized 4 minutes later, then another. By the 5th call, my communication device was vibrating so aggressively on the culinary table that it nearly descended to the surface. I extracted it on the 6th sound. Greetings, Marcus. Mother, his tone was strained, panic scarcely contained beneath a thin veneer of control. There's a difficulty with the financial accounts. Some variety of technical issue. The funds from the transaction aren't displaying up. I consumed a slow sip of my tea. That's peculiar. Have you contacted the financial institution? Of course I contacted the financial institution. The veneer was already fracturing. They stated the account was sealed yesterday afternoon. Sealed? Mother? How does an account just seal itself? I wouldn't comprehend, dear. Financial matters isn't genuinely my area of expertise, as you've reminded me many occasions. There was a pause, and I could detect Veronica's tone in the background, piercing and demanding. Marcus covered the communication device, but I could still make out her declarations. Tell her to repair it. Presently. Mother. Marcus's tone was back, more controlled, but with an edge I'd never detected before. I require you to contact Leonard. There's obviously been some variety of error with the documentation. The transaction currency should have been deposited yesterday. I'll contact him in the morning, I stated pleasantly. It's nearly 3:30 a.m. here, Marcus. I'm certain whatever it is can anticipate until commercial hours. No, it can't anticipate. The control snapped completely. We're in Venice, Mother. We have reservations, plans. I compensated for an accommodation at one of the most costly hotels in Europe. Our cards aren't functioning either. I manufactured a sympathetic clicking sound with my tongue. That does sound inconvenient. I hope you brought some physical currency for emergencies. The line went quiet except for the sound of Marcus's respiration, which was becoming increasingly ragged. When he spoke again, his tone was dangerously low. Mother, I'm going to inquire you once more, and I require you to listen very carefully. Contact Leonard right presently and locate out where our currency is. Our currency? I repeated the phrase gradually, tasting each declaration. I wasn't aware that you and I had any joint accounts, Marcus. The currency from the transaction, my inheritance, the 3.2 million that should be in my account right presently. I positioned my tea vessel with calculated care. Oh, that currency? Yes, I comprehend precisely where that is. Thank the heavens. I detected him exhale. So contact Leonard and... It's in my account, I stated simply. The quietness that followed was so complete, I wondered if the call had dropped. Then Marcus's tone came back, scarcely above a murmur. What did you articulate? I stated the currency is in my account, where it's invariably existed, where it will stay. The explosion was immediate. What the inferno are you conversing about? I liquidated the enterprise. I have the documentation. You authorized it yourself. Yes, you did liquidate the enterprise. And yes, I did authorize the documents. You liquidated 25% of Howard Industries for $3.2 million. Quite favorable compensation for what you genuinely possessed. All matters considered. I could detect Veronica presently, her tone getting closer to the communication device. What is she articulating? Marcus, what is she conversing about? Mother. Marcus's tone was shaking presently, whether from rage or fear, I couldn't tell. Stop performing entertainments. You can't execute this. The enterprise was father's. It's mine presently. The enterprise designation was your father's. Yes. And the daily functions, the personnel compensation, the office lease, all of that was yours to liquidate, and you executed. Congratulations. Then where... His tone cut off abruptly and I comprehended he was beginning to understand. Where are the assets? I finished for him. The patents, the international contracts, the commercial properties, the manufacturing entitlements. Those were never part of what you inherited, dear. Those were invariably mine. The communication device clattered, and I detected Veronica's tone clearly presently. Give me that communication device. Mrs. Patterson, this is Veronica. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Greetings, Veronica. How's the meteorological conditions in Venice? Never mind the meteorological conditions. Marcus is telling me you're claiming possession of assets that rightfully belong to him. That's not legally possible. I've perceived the incorporation documents. You've perceived some incorporation documents, I corrected. The ones Marcus desired you to perceive. Tell me, did you occur to review the Summit Foundation contracts, or the Richardson Holdings subsidiary, Or perhaps the intellectual property assignments filed with the state? The quietness told me everything I required to comprehend. I didn't think so, I continued. You perceive, Veronica, when you spend 43 years building a commerce, you learn to safeguard your interests. You learn that sometimes the most significant assets are the ones that aren't written on the letterhead. Marcus's tone came back on the line, and presently there was definitely fear there. Mother, you can't execute this. I'm your offspring. We're household. Yes, we are household, which is why you sensed comfortable calling me dead weight and liquidating what you thought was my existence's operation without even consulting me. I positioned from the culinary table and proceeded to the aperture, observing out at the sunrise beginning to paint the sky rose-colored. Tell me, Marcus, did you genuinely think I was so senile that I wouldn't comprehend what you were planning? Planning? I wasn't planning anything. I was attempting to assist you. You were attempting to assist yourself to what you thought was an easy inheritance. The difference is that you were counting on me being the helpless, aged woman you've convinced yourself I am. Veronica grasped the communication device again. This is elder mistreatment. We're going to sue you for everything you possess. I chuckled, a genuine sound of amusement. With what currency, dear? And which legal counsels? The ones you haven't compensated yet, because you're positioning in a hotel entrance in Venice without access to funds? We'll figure it out, Marcus stated, back on the line presently. I'll contact everyone I comprehend. I'll contact Father's former commercial partners. They'll advance me the currency to struggle this. You mean the commercial partners whose contracts are presently void because the enterprise they partnered with no longer exists in any meaningful form? I inquired. Or perhaps you mean the ones who are currently negotiating novel, more lucrative agreements with Summit Foundation? The sound that materialized through the communication device was something between a growl and a sob. You planned this. You planned all of this. I prepared for it. I corrected. There's a difference. I hoped you would prove me incorrect. I hoped you would demonstrate me that you valued our relationship more than you valued what you could extract from me. I devalue our relationship. No, Marcus. You value what you thought our relationship could obtain you. There's a difference there, too. I detected hotel entrance sounds in the background, tones speaking rapid Italian, and the unmistakable sound of an elevation apparatus. They were clearly attempting to sort out their situation in public, which couldn't be pleasant. How long have you comprehended? Marcus inquired quietly. Comprehended what? Comprehended that I was going to liquidate the enterprise. I considered lying, making it seem like I'd just recently figured it out. But Marcus deserved the reality, even if it was going to damage. 3 years, I stated simply, since the week after your father's memorial, when you told me I should presumably start thinking about simplifying my commercial responsibilities. 3 years, he repeated numbly. 3 years of observing you circle like a vulture, anticipating for the appropriate moment to convince me I was incompetent. 3 years of listening to you and Veronica murmur about my memory, my capabilities, my age. 3 years of preparing for this precise discussion. Veronica's tone was back, shrill presently with panic. We can't stay here without currency. Do you understand that? We're going to be expelled from this hotel. I'm certain you'll figure something out, I stated. You're both so much more capable than I am, after all. Surely a little difficulty like being stranded in Europe without funds is nothing for people with your commercial acumen. Mother, please, Marcus's tone broke on the declaration. I manufactured an error. I perceive that presently. Just tell me what I have to execute to repair this. For a moment, just a moment, I sensed the former familiar tug of maternal instinct, the desire to rescue him, to make everything superior, to be the maternal parent who solved all his difficulties. But then I remembered positioning in my parlor yesterday, listening to him call me dead weight. You can commence by figuring out how to obtain habitation from Venice without my assistance, I stated. Consider it a learning experience in difficulty solving. You can't just abandon us here. I'm not abandoning you, Marcus. I'm letting you experience what independence feels like. Isn't that what you desired? To be liberated of your burden of a maternal parent? The communication device went quiet except for the sound of Marcus's respiration. When he spoke again, his tone was diminutive, defeated. What occurs presently? Now you learn what I've invariably comprehended, I stated, observing the sunrise paint the world in shades of golden. That household isn't just about blood. It's about respect, And respect isn't something you inherit, Marcus. It's something you earn. I terminated the call and deactivated the sound mechanism. According to my count, that had been call number 14. If my estimations were correct, I had 42 more to anticipate. I manufactured myself a fresh vessel of tea and positioned back at the culinary table with my electronic tablet. I had electronic messages to read, commercial determinations to make, and an enterprise to operate. The genuine enterprise, the one that had never stopped being mine. Outside, the world was awakening to a beautiful novel diurnal period. By midday, my communication device had recorded 41 missed calls. I'd rotated the sound mechanism back on around 10:30 a.m. Curious to detect how the manner of Marcus's messages would evolve as his situation became more desperate. I wasn't disappointed. The messages progressed from confused to angry to pleading to threatening and back to pleading again. Veronica's tone appeared more frequently as the morning wore on, her earlier politeness completely abandoned in favor of increasingly shrill demands. I was in my botanical area pruning the roses Benjamin had planted for our 23rd anniversary when call number 42 materialized. This occasion, I answered on the initial sound. "Favorable afternoon, Marcus." "Mother." His tone was presently exhausted. "We require to converse. Genuinely converse. I'm listening." Not on the communication device, countenance to countenance, we're materializing habitation. I paused in my pruning, considering this development. "With what currency? I believe you mentioned that your cards weren't functioning." I contacted Uncle Samuel. He's transmitting us currency for aerial transportation tickets. Benjamin's sibling, Samuel, the one who'd invariably been jealous of our success. I could exclusively imagine the discussion Marcus had with him, presumably painting me as a vindictive aged woman who'd stolen his rightful inheritance. "That was resourceful of you," I stated. "We'll be back tomorrow evening. Will you be at habitation?" "This is my habitation, Marcus. Where else would I be?" The line went quiet for a moment. "Mother, I require you to comprehend that I'm going to struggle this legally. I can't let you destroy Father's legacy out of spite." "Benjamin's legacy," I repeated gradually. "Tell me, Marcus, what do you think your father's legacy genuinely is?" "The enterprise. The commerce he built from emptiness." "We built from emptiness," I corrected. "Your father and I together, but I understand why you'd forget that detail." "Fine, we built. That doesn't modify the fact that you're destroying it presently." I positioned my pruning implements and positioned on the botanical bench Benjamin had built for me after my initial health concern 11 years ago. "I'm not destroying anything, Marcus. I'm safeguarding it." "From who?" "From you." The honesty of my answer seemed to catch him off guard. Several seconds passed before he responded. "From me? Mother, I'm attempting to honor Father's memory. I'm attempting to build on what he created. What you're attempting to execute is liquidate as quickly as possible, so you and Veronica can exist a lifestyle you haven't earned." My tone was tranquil, matter of fact. "The purchaser you located, Continental Industries, they specialize in acquiring enterprises just to strip their assets and terminate their personnel. Did you comprehend that?" "Quietness. I thought not." "Did you comprehend that they plan to seal our office and relocate everything within 8 months? Did you comprehend that 51 households would have lost their employment by Christmas?" "That's not I didn't." "You didn't inquire, Marcus. You perceived an extensive number in monetary symbols, and you didn't inquire what would occur to the people your father and I spent 43 years building relationships with." I could detect Veronica in the background, her tone urgent, but too distant to make out declarations. "The personnel would have located other employment," Marcus stated, but his tone lacked conviction. "Patricia Morrison has been our office administrator for 21 years. She's 59 years mature with a secondary education. When do you think she'd locate another employment that compensates what we compensate her? Thomas Sullivan has been with us since he was 25. His offspring just commenced university. How precisely do you think he'd manage tuition after being terminated? Commerce isn't charity, Mother. Sometimes people get damaged." "You're correct. Commerce isn't charity, but it's not pillaging either. There's a difference between making difficult determinations and making selfish ones." The discussion was interrupted by what sounded like a dispute in Italian, hotel staff presumably. I could imagine the scene Marcus and Veronica positioning in an opulent entrance, appearing increasingly disheveled as they attempted to negotiate with people who didn't care about their American entitlement. "We'll be at habitation tomorrow," Marcus stated finally, "and we'll settle this properly." I anticipate it. After he terminated, I positioned in the botanical area for a long duration, thinking about the discussion and what would materialize next. I comprehended Marcus would engage legal counsels the moment he obtained back. I comprehended he'd attempt to locate some manner to challenge the foundation structure, to claim I'd manipulated Benjamin or extracted advantage of his illness. What Marcus didn't comprehend was that I'd been preparing for that possibility too. I extracted my communication device and contacted Leonard again. "Let me speculate," he stated before I could speak. "They discovered about Venice." Call number 42. They're traveling back tomorrow on Uncle Samuel's monetary assistance and Marcus's threatening legal action. He thinks he can overturn the foundation. Leonard chuckled. "I assume you're prepared for that too." "Extract the video files," I stated. "All of them. The committee assemblies, the household dinners, the discussions in Benjamin's office. If Marcus desires to claim I manipulated his father, let's demonstrate everyone precisely who was manipulating whom. For the past 36 months, ever since Marcus had commenced making noises about my competence, I'd been recording our interactions. Not secretively, precisely, but not obviously either. A diminutive electronic recorder in my container during household dinners, tone memo applications operating during communication device calls, security photographic devices in the office that captured more than just intrusions. I'd learned long ago that documentation was protection, especially for women in commerce, especially for aged women in commerce. "How extensive are we conversing?" Leonard inquired. "Extensive enough." Marcus telling Benjamin that I was getting confused about basic commercial concepts. Marcus suggesting to his father that maybe it was duration to transition me into an advisory role exclusively. Marcus discussing with Veronica how to convince me that liquidating was in my superior interest. And Benjamin's responses? I grinned, remembering Benjamin defending me every single occasion. Benjamin explaining to Marcus that I was the strategic consciousness behind 92% of our successful agreements. Benjamin telling his offspring, quote, "Your maternal parent could operate circles around most chief executive officers half her age, and if you can't perceive that, you're not as intelligent as I cultivated you to be." Ah, Marcus won't be anticipating that. Marcus has never anticipated much from me. It's been his greatest feebleness. That evening, I manufactured myself a simple dinner and positioned in to review the fiscal documents from our international divisions. Summit Foundation wasn't just a holding enterprise. It was an actively growing enterprise. While Marcus had been concentrated on the flashy headquarters and the domestic client base, I'd been quietly expanding our reach into markets he'd never even considered. Our partnership with a sustainable manufacturing enterprise in Germany was generating more revenue than our entire domestic function. Our licensing agreements in Japan had tripled in valuation over the past 20 months. The software patents we developed for inventory management were being utilized by enterprises across 4 continents. Marcus thought he'd liquidated our enterprise for $3.2 million. What he genuinely executed was liquidate the least valuable portion of an empire worth more than $18 million. My communication device buzzed with an electronic message from an unknown number. "This isn't terminated. You've manufactured the biggest error of your existence. V." Veronica apparently had located a manner to send international electronic messages. I wondered if she'd borrowed someone's communication device, or if she'd convinced Uncle Samuel to include messaging in his emergency assistance. I typed back, "The biggest error of my existence was letting you into my household. I'm correcting that presently." The response materialized immediately. "Marcus will never forgive you for this." I gazed at that message for a long moment, sensing something settle deep in my chest, something that felt like relief. "Favorable," I typed back. "Maybe presently we can have an honest relationship." I deactivated my communication device after that and spent the evening reading. Benjamin had invariably stated that the superior commercial determinations were manufactured with a clear consciousness and a tranquil cardiac muscle. Tomorrow would bring drama, accusations, and presumably legal counsels. Tonight, I desired to enjoy the peace of a dwelling that finally felt like mine again. Around midnight, I proceeded through the chambers Benjamin and I had distributed for so many years. The parlor where we'd planned our initial expansion. The culinary chamber where we'd celebrated our biggest contracts. The office where we'd operated side by side, building something we were proud of. For 36 months, this dwelling had felt like a mausoleum, a shrine to a gentleman who was eliminated, and a commerce I thought I'd lost control of. Tonight, it felt alive again. I stopped before the household photographs lining the corridor, observing at images of Marcus as a child, a teenager, a young gentleman just commencing his career. In every photograph, he was grinning, confident, surrounded by affection and support. I'd given him everything I could think of to give him: education, opportunity, unconditional affection, and a path to success. What I'd apparently failed to give him was respect for the people who'd provided all those matters. Tomorrow, he'd learn what it felt like to lose them. And maybe, if I was very fortunate, he'd also learn what it consumed to earn them back. Marcus's rental vehicle entered my property at 7 to 17 p.m. the following evening. I'd been observing from the culinary aperture, timing their materialization with the identical precision I'd once utilized to schedule international conference calls. They were 15 minutes later than the aerial transportation tracking application had predicted, which meant they'd presumably disputed about something during the journey from the aerial transportation port. I didn't rush to answer the entrance when Marcus's familiar, demanding knock echoed through the dwelling. Instead, I concluded washing my dinner vessels, dried my hands carefully, and smoothed my hair before proceeding gradually to the corridor. Through the frosted glass, I could perceive two figures positioning stiffly on my entrance platform. When I unsealed the entrance, the difference in their appearance was startling. Marcus's usually immaculate blazer was wrinkled from travel, his hair disheveled, and his optical organs held a wild, desperate observation I'd never perceived before. Veronica appeared even worse. Her cosmetics was smeared, her designer garments appeared slept in, and she was grasping an oversized container like a life preserver. "Mother," Marcus stated, his tone carefully controlled. "We require to converse." "Of course. Materialize in." They followed me to the parlor, the identical space where this had all commenced just 5 diurnal periods prior. But the dynamic had shifted completely. Where Marcus had once positioned confidently, presently he perched on the edge of the furniture like he was prepared to flee. Veronica positioned beside him, her optical organs darting around the chamber as if she was cataloging items for potential valuation. "I've brought my legal counsel," Marcus announced, attempting to reclaim some authority. "He'll be here tomorrow morning. We're going to contest the foundation contracts." "That's certainly your entitlement," I stated pleasantly, positioning myself into my preferred seat. Though I should caution you that legal challenges to properly executed foundations rarely succeed, especially when there's 33 years of documentation supporting their validity. Veronica inclined forward, her composure finally fracturing completely. "You can't execute this to us, Dorothy. We have an existence planned. We have commitments." I resigned my employment at the medical facility because Marcus stated we'd be established for existence. "You resigned your employment?" I elevated an eyebrow. "How presumptuous of you." "We purchased a dwelling," Marcus stated quietly. "Based on the expected transaction compensation. The down compensation is due following week." "That does sound like a difficulty," I agreed. Deficient fiscal planning often guides to such difficulties. Marcus's careful control slipped. "Stop performing entertainments. You comprehend what you've executed. You've stolen what rightfully belongs to me." "Have I?" I extracted a manila folder from the side table beside my seat. "Let's review what rightfully belonged to you, shall we?" I unsealed the folder and spread several contracts across the table. Marcus and Veronica inclined forward, squinting at the legal text. "This is your father's testament," I stated, pointing to the initial contract. "As you can perceive, he departed you the household commerce as it was legally constituted at the duration of his demise. That included the corporate designation, the office lease, the personnel contracts, and the domestic client relationships." Marcus grasped the contract, scanning it frantically. "It articulates I inherit his portion of Howard Industries, which was 65% of the enterprise." "Correct. 65% of Howard Industries as it existed 36 months prior." I extracted another contract. However, This is the amendment your father authorized 20 months before his demise, formally acknowledging that the most valuable assets had been transferred to separate entities in which he held no possession stake. That's impossible, Veronica stated, snatching the document. Benjamin wouldn't have authorized away his personal assets. Benjamin didn't authorize away anything, I corrected. Benjamin acknowledged what had invariably been factual, that those assets were mine to begin with. I was the one who developed the patents, negotiated the international contracts, and purchased the commercial properties. They were never his to depart to anyone. I observed Marcus's countenance as the reality sank in. His expression cycled through confusion, rage, and finally a variety of hollow understanding. "You planned this from the beginning," he murmured. "I safeguarded what I built," I stated, just as any intelligent commerce person would. Marcus positioned abruptly and began moving. "No, this is more than that. You let me believe I was inheriting a multi-million monetary unit enterprise. You observed me make plans, make commitments, resign my employment to concentrate on operating the commerce full duration. You established me up to fail. I gave you precisely what your father departed you," I stated tranquilly. "If you selected to make assumptions about the valuation without executing proper due diligence, that's not my responsibility." "Due diligence?" Marcus's tone cracked. "You're my maternal parent. I trusted you." "Did you? Because from where I position, it appears like you trusted that I was too foolish and too grief-stricken to notice what you were planning." I extracted my communication device and scrolled to a tone recording I'd saved from 9 months prior. Marcus's tone filled the chamber, tiny but clear from the communication device's diminutive speaker. "Veronica, I'm telling you, she has no concept what she's positioning on. Mother thinks the enterprise is worth maybe 3.5 million tops. She's invariably been clueless about the fiscals. Once I convince her to liquidate, we'll possess enough to purchase that dwelling in the elite district and still possess millions departed over. The aged lady will be so grateful for our assistance, she'll presumably give us power of attorney over her personal accounts too." The recording continued for another 40 seconds, with Marcus chuckling about how easy it would be to manipulate his scattered maternal parent into making determinations that would benefit him. Veronica's countenance went pale. "Where did you obtain that?" "Marcus manufactured that call from your culinary chamber previous December when I was appearing for your habitation warming celebration. You'd stepped out to obtain wine, and Marcus thought I was in the lavatory. I was genuinely right around the corner, grasping my communication device." "You've been recording us," Marcus stated, his cranium in his hands. "I've been safeguarding myself," I corrected. "Something I learned to execute during 43 years of being underestimated by gentlemen who thought they were more intelligent than me." I extracted another communication device and performed a second recording. This one from Marcus's discussion with his father just 7 months before Benjamin's demise. "Father, I'm concerned about maternal parent. She seems confused about basic commercial concepts lately. Maybe it's duration to commence transitioning her into more of an advisory role. You comprehend? Let me handle the daily functions before she manufactures an error that requires us everything." Benjamin's response was crystal clear. "Offspring. Your maternal parent has forgotten more about commerce than you've learned yet. If you think she's confused, you're not compensating attention. She's been operating circles around competitors half her age, while you've been concentrated on the office politics." Marcus's tone on the recording became petulant. "I just think fresh perspectives might be valuable. Some of her concepts seem pretty outdated." Benjamin's chuckle was audible, even through the communication device's diminutive speaker. "Marcus, your maternal parent sealed a 2.5 million international agreement previous week while you were complaining about the coffee in the break room. Maybe concern less about her perspectives and more about developing your personal." When the recording terminated, Marcus appeared corporeally ill. Veronica was gazing at him with an expression of dawning horror. "You told me she was losing her consciousness," she stated gradually. "You articulated the medical professionals were concerned about early dementia." "I never articulated that," Marcus protested feebly. "You absolutely articulated that." Veronica's tone was getting louder. "You articulated that's why we required to act quickly before she manufactured determinations that would damage the household finances." I cleared my throat. There were never any medical professional concerns about dementia. My previous cognitive assessment, executed as part of my annual corporeal 5 months prior, displayed no indications of any mental decline whatsoever. I can provide you with the medical records if you'd like. Veronica rotated to gaze at Marcus with an observation of pure disgust. You lied to me about everything. I didn't lie, Marcus stated desperately. I was attempting to safeguard our future. Mother's getting aged, and I thought... You thought you could steal from your personal maternal parent and convince your wife it was for her personal favorable? I concluded. The inquiry presently is what you're planning to execute next. Marcus observed around the chamber like a trapped animal. I'll contest the foundation. I'll hire the superior legal counsels. I'll prove that you manipulated father when he was ill. With what currency? I inquired reasonably. Your cards don't operate, remember? Uncle Samuel compensated for your aerial transportation tickets, but I doubt he's prepared to fund a prolonged legal struggle against foundations that have been properly preserved for 3 generations. I'll figure something out. You could, I agreed, or you could accept reality and determine what variety of relationship you desire to possess going forward. Veronica positioned abruptly. I'm not staying for this, Marcus. Repair this or I'm terminated. I didn't marry someone who would lie to me about millions of monetary units and then lose it all through sheer foolishness. She stormed toward the entrance, her stilettos clicking angrily against the hardwood surface. Marcus commenced to follow her, then stopped and rotated back to me. What do you desire from me? He inquired, his tone broken. I desire you to determine whether you affection me or just what you thought I could give you. I stated quietly, because one of those relationships has a future and one of them doesn't. Marcus gazed at me for a long moment, then proceeded out without another declaration. Through the aperture, I observed him and Veronica have what appeared to be a vicious dispute beside their rental vehicle. She obtained in on the passenger side, slammed the entrance, and they journeyed away. My communication device sounded 25 minutes later. Marcus's number. Mother, I require a place to stay tonight. Veronica expelled me from the hotel. The spare chamber is available, I stated. The rent is 65 monetary units a night, and you'll require to assist with housework. 65 monetary units? Mother, I don't possess 65 monetary units. Then I speculate you'd superior commence figuring out how to earn some. There was a long pause. Are you genuinely going to manufacture me homeless? I'm going to let you experience what independence appears like when you don't possess a safety mechanism. I stated, consider it an education in personal responsibility. I'm your offspring. Yes, I stated, and its duration you learned what that genuinely means. 7 months later, I positioned in the culinary chamber manufacturing coffee for 2, a routine that had become as natural as respiration. The morning solar illumination streamed through apertures that sparkled. Marcus had purified them yesterday as part of his weekly responsibilities. The dwelling had never appeared superior or felt more peaceful. Favorable morning, Mother. Marcus appeared in the entrance passage, dressed in casual attire, his hair still damp from the lavatory. The designer blazers were long eliminated, liquidated months prior to assist compensate for basic necessities. Favorable morning. How did you rest? Superior than I have in years, genuinely. He moved to the storage unit and extracted 2 vessels, a gesture that had become automatic. I concluded reviewing the trimestral documents previous night. The German partnership is exceeding projections by 21%. I grinned, handing him his coffee black, the manner he'd learned to consume it when costly coffee manufacturing devices and elaborate creamers were no longer in the budget. And the Tokyo expansion? The contract should be finalized by the termination of the month. Your instincts about the marketplace timing were perfect. It had consumed Marcus 4 months to stop being bitter about operating for his maternal parent instead of inheriting her enterprise. It had consumed another 3 months for him to realize that he was genuinely learning more about commerce than he ever had when he thought he was entitled to success. The transformation hadn't been easy or attractive. After Veronica departed him at the hotel that night, Marcus had spent 3 weeks resting on companions' furniture, attempting to borrow currency for legal counsels to contest the foundation. One by one, his companions had stopped returning his calls when they realized he had no manner to compensate them back. Uncle Samuel had refused to fund a legal struggle after Benjamin's legal counsel confirmed that the foundation contracts were airtight. Marcus had finally displayed up on my entrance platform 4 weeks later, exhausted and humbled, inquiring if my proposition of the spare chamber was still available. "I'll compensate the 65 monetary units a night," he'd stated, positioning on the entrance platform with a single luggage container. "And I'll execute the housework. I just require somewhere to stay while I figure out what materializes next." "What materializes next is up to you," I'd told him. "But if you're staying here, you follow my regulations." The regulations had been simple, but non-negotiable. No intoxication, no substances, no overnight visitors without permission. Rent compensated weekly in advance. Household obligations assigned and completed without complaint. Most significantly, if he desired to be part of the household commerce again, he would commence at the bottom and operate his manor up based on merit, not bloodline. "I have an assembly with the Richardson Corporation this afternoon," I stated presently, positioning at the culinary table with my coffee. "Would you like to position in?" Marcus's optical organs illuminated. "Genuinely? They're one of our biggest potential clients. They're also notoriously difficult to operate with. I thought you might learn something from observing how to handle demanding customers." 7 months prior, Marcus would have bristled at the suggestion that he required to learn anything. Presently, he acknowledged eagerly, "I'd appreciate that. Should I prepare anything in advance?" "Review their file. Study their previous partnerships. Think about why they might be hesitant to operate with us and how we might address those concerns." "Already executed," Marcus stated, extracting a notebook filled with his penmanship. I stayed up until midnight researching their corporate culture and recent marketplace challenges. I sensed a familiar warmth in my chest, the identical sensation I'd had when Marcus was 9 years mature and had spent hours building an elaborate construction, determined to obtain every detail perfect. Somewhere along the manor, I'd lost that concentrated, determined child. I was grateful to perceive glimpses of him returning. "Marcus," I stated carefully, "I desire you to comprehend that I'm proud of how vigorously you've been operating." He elevated his gaze from his notebook, surprised. "You are?" "I am. When you initially materialized back, I wasn't certain if you were here because you genuinely desired to transform or just because you had nowhere else to journey." "Honestly?" Marcus's countenance reddened marginally. "At initial, it was because I had nowhere else to journey. I spent those weeks on furniture planning how I was going to prove you incorrect, how I was going to obtain back what I thought was mine. It consumed me a while to realize that what I thought was mine was never genuinely mine to begin with. And presently, Marcus positioned his coffee vessel and observed directly at me. Now I realize that I wasted the initial 38 years of my existence attempting to live up to an image of father that wasn't even genuine. I thought being a gentleman meant extracting what I desired and never inquiring for assistance. I thought strength meant never admitting when I was incorrect. And what do you think presently? I think father was successful because he was intelligent enough to marry someone more intelligent than him, and humble enough to listen to her advice. Marcus's tone was steady, serious. I think I missed out on 38 years of learning from the most capable person I comprehend because I was too arrogant to perceive past my personal assumptions. The discussion was interrupted by the sounding of my communication device. The caller identification displayed a number I hadn't perceived in months. Veronica. Marcus perceived the designation on the screen and tensed. "Are you going to answer it?" I'm curious what she desires after all this duration. I accepted the call. "Greetings, Veronica." "Dorothy. Hi. I hope I'm not calling at a deficient duration." Her tone was different, smaller somehow, less confident than I remembered. "It's fine. What can I execute for you?" I was wondering, is Marcus there? I've been attempting to reach him, but his number's been disconnected. I glanced at Marcus, who was shaking his cranium vigorously. "He's here. Would you like to speak with him?" "Actually, I was hoping to speak with you initially. I possess something I require articulating." Marcus elevated his eyebrows but didn't object when I positioned the communication device on speaker. "I owe you an apology," Veronica continued. "An extensive one. I was incorrect about you, and I was incorrect to encourage Marcus to execute what he executed." "What transformed your consciousness?" I inquired. "Existence," she stated with a bitter chuckle. After I departed Marcus, I relocated back with my maternal and paternal parents. I've been employment hunting for 7 months, and let me tell you, it's humbling. I forgot what it was like to genuinely operate for matters instead of just anticipating them to be handed to me. I perceive. I also had duration to think about our marriage, about the person I was when I was with Marcus. I didn't like that person very much. I was entitled and greedy and completely comfortable with the concept of extracting advantage of someone who'd executed nothing but affection and support their child. Marcus was gazing at the communication device with an expression I couldn't quite read. I called to apologize to you, Veronica continued, but also to tell Marcus something significant. The divorce documents are being filed this week. I'm not inquiring for anything except my personal belongings. I don't deserve anything more than that. Veronica, Marcus stated quietly, you don't have to. Yes, I execute, Marcus. You manufactured errors, but I manufactured them worse. I pushed you to perceive your maternal parent as an obstacle instead of an ally. I convinced you that extracting advantage of her was somehow justified. I'm ashamed of who I was, and I'm apologetic. After she terminated, Marcus and I positioned in quietness for several minutes. How do you sense? I inquired finally. Relieved, he stated without hesitation. Sad, but relieved. The person I was when I was married to Veronica wasn't someone I liked very much either. And presently, Marcus observed around the culinary chamber, at the simple breakfast we distributed, at the honest operation awaiting for both of us. Now I sense like maybe I'm becoming someone father would have been proud of. Your father was invariably proud of you, I stated gently. He just desired you to be proud of yourself, too. That afternoon's assembly with the Richardson Corporation proceeded superior than I'd hoped. Marcus inquired intelligent inquiries, consumed detailed notations, and proposed insights that displayed he genuinely executed his preparation. When they inquired about our succession planning, I was capable to point to Marcus as our director of functions, a title he'd earned through 7 months of extensive operation weeks and flawless performance. After the clients departed, Marcus and I positioned in the conference chamber reviewing the notations. I think they're going to authorize, he stated, organizing his documents. I think so too. That was excellent operation today. Marcus grinned, but then his expression grew serious. Mother, can I inquire you something? Of course. When you were establishing the foundation structures, when you were safeguarding the assets from me, did you comprehend it would terminate up like this? With me operating for you, learning the commerce properly? I considered the inquiry carefully. I hoped it would, but I was prepared for the possibility that you'd proceed away forever and never speak to me again. What would you have executed then? I would have operated the enterprise myself until I couldn't anymore, then liquidated it to someone who would consume care of our personnel. I paused, but I would have missed you every diurnal period for the remainder of my existence. Marcus's optical organs filled with tears. I'm apologetic. I positioned you through that. I'm apologetic. I manufactured you since, like you had to select between safeguarding yourself and safeguarding me. You didn't manufacture me select, I stated. You manufactured a selection about what variety of offspring you desired to be. I just manufactured certain that selection had genuine consequences. And if I'd selected differently, if I'd kept struggling you in court, then you would have learned that respect can't be inherited or stolen. It can exclusively be earned. Marcus acknowledged gradually. I think I'm finally commencing to understand that. As we packed up to depart the office, Marcus rotated to me one more occasion. Mother, thank you. For what? For not giving up on me. For demonstrating me who I could become instead of just accepting who I was. I grinned, thinking about the long journey that had brought us to this moment. That's what maternal parents execute, Marcus. We affection you enough to let you fail, and we affection you enough to assist you succeed. Even when your children call you deadweight, especially then, I stated, because that's when they require us most. 7 months prior, I'd thought I was losing my offspring. Instead, I'd located him the genuine him underneath all the entitlement and assumptions. The gentleman Benjamin and I had invariably hoped he'd become. It had consumed losing everything for Marcus to discover what genuinely mattered, and it had consumed risking everything for me to salvage the relationship that mattered most. As we proceeded out of the office together, I realized that this was what victory genuinely appeared like. Not the moment you prove you're correct, but the moment everyone finally understands what was worth struggling for. Presently, I'm curious about you who listened to my narrative. What would you execute if you were in my position? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm departing on the final screen 2 other narratives that are Minister of Revenge channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for observing until here.